Okay, here we go. We're getting really close now. This is the 8th of 12, so we only got four more, another month of this, and then we'll be starting our next book, which will be Roaming Free Inside the Cage by William Schaefer. If you want to make note of that, if you're watching the recording here. We're going to be starting tonight on page 117, the welcoming prayer, or the welcoming practice, as it's sometimes called. Before we dive into this, is there any old business? Anything from last week? Anything that you want to bring up and develop further before we move into the new material? Well, alrighty then. I don't have too many takers now that Tony's gone for the summer. Tony always had something cooking. Okay, page 117, the welcoming prayer. Spiritual teacher Mary Marzowski composed and first taught what is now called the welcoming prayer, which many have found to be life-changing. Popularized by my dear friend and mentor, Father Thomas Keating, it is this simple and this hard. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I welcome everything that comes to me today because I know it's for my healing. I welcome all thoughts, feelings, emotions, persons, situations, and conditions. I let go of my desire for power and control. I let go of my desire for affection, esteem, approval, and pleasure. I let go of my desire for survival and security. I let go of my desire to change any situation, condition, person, or myself. I open to the love and presence of God and God's action within. Amen. Rather than resisting or fighting our addictions or thoughts, feelings, behaviors, etc., we admit our powerlessness as the first step toward healing and freedom. This simple prayer brings this practice into our day-to-day life to counteract our habitual reactions. While the set-aside time for meditation is truly valuable in rewiring our brains, the welcoming prayer helps us find serenity through surrender in the midst of messy, ordinary moments. When you are triggered or caught by something unpleasant, begin by simply being present to your feeling, experiencing it not just mentally, but also emotionally and physically. Don't try to rationalize or explain the feeling, but witness and give attention to this sensation. Welcome the feeling, speaking aloud if you can. Welcome anger, fear, hunger, longing, etc. Repeat this as many times as you need to truly sense yourself embracing and receiving the feeling. Then pray the welcoming prayer regularly. Even daily is probably not too much. It can become your daily bread. Okay, any initial thoughts? Anything stand out?
Well, just that it says initially that it's simple and it's also hard.
Yeah, like
Probably hard to
everything along
accept.
Jesus' way, right, Kathy?
Yeah, right.
I guess one of the things was welcoming everything. I know it's for my healing. I think so many times that it's for my learning and training and deepening, not
Hmm.
just healing.
Hmm.
It reminds me of the third step prayer. God, I offer myself to be me. I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt, to relieve me of my self-inflicted bondage, um, and to take away my difficulties so that I may better do help others, bear witness to others. I'm paraphrasing of thy will and thy power and thy way of life, like just totally letting go, accepting powerlessness, losing control. letting go of the need to control, desire to change, the desire for survival and security, just letting go of absolutely everything in order to gain absolutely everything. It's beautiful.
That's great. That's a good connection, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Now, stated the way that he states it, it may be a little bit deceiving. Even calling it the welcoming prayer. I prefer to call it the welcoming practice. It contains a prayer, but this is something that you need to practice. It's not just something that you recite. Um, Although it can be something that you recite, it can be both. So you probably heard me talk about offline and online contemplative practice. And so the offline is when we set aside time that's specifically dedicated to try to do some sort of activity or meditation or centering prayer that allows us to step outside and practice the technique of stepping outside of our egoic consciousness. And then online is when we take that technique through our daily experience, day-to-day activities, and bring that to bear as mindful presence and using the technique to bring us back when we realize that we have exited the moment, right? And so the welcoming practice or welcoming prayer can be used both ways. And he says that in here. This more extended prayer that you see here is something that you can use almost as a mantra in terms of continuing to recite it to yourself daily, to bring your mind back to the practice of being able to step outside of emotional triggers. But the welcoming practice itself would be a kind of a three-step process when you're in the midst of those triggers that are designed to allow you to stop, to be able to really lean into the emotion that you're feeling, welcome it as the opportunity for learning and growing, and then moving through it and then back into the present moment. And so it's going to be both. And we're going to look at this in greater depth in some material outside of the text for this evening. So going back to the top, he talks about the origin of it. Miriam Mrazowski is a nun who was a personal friend of Thomas Keating, who developed centering prayer, and then also a centering prayer adherent herself. And she developed the welcoming practice out of that. So then we have this text. And if you notice, it contains all the elements that we just talked about. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I welcome everything that comes to me today because I know it's for my healing. I welcome all thoughts, feelings, emotions, persons, situations, and conditions. So you kind of see those first two parts of the welcoming practice encapsulated in the prayer itself. That whatever we're experiencing, and it's going to be experienced negatively, is still a part of ourselves. It's either illuminating our shadow, it's doing whatever it's doing, but we need to own it. We need to feel it. One of the worst things that we can do, of course, is avoid or repress. So to really sit in it, really own the feeling, the trigger that's overcoming us, and then to welcome it as this opportunity for growth. It's for my healing, is the way it's put here. And then the third step is to move, through. There's a specific prayer that could be said. You could have your own, really. But it's interesting that here she uses Thomas Keating's three biological needs, because he's always talking about the child's need for survival and security, for power and control and affection and esteem. Those are the three biological needs that Thomas Keating had delineated. He expands it a little bit here. She does. I let go of my desire for affection, esteem, but also approval and pleasure. And then also, I let go of my desire to change any situation, condition, person, or myself. That's the control part that Sarah was talking about in the third step prayer as well. And I open to the love and presence of God and God's action within. So rather than resisting or fighting our addictions to thoughts, things, behaviors, etc., we admit our powerlessness as the first step toward healing and freedom. And of course, you probably noticed the first step of powerlessness is from the 12 steps of AA as well. This simple prayer brings this practice into our day-to-day life to counteract our habitual reactions. While the set-aside time for meditation is truly valuable in rewiring our brains, the welcoming prayer helps us to find serenity through surrender in the midst of messy, ordinary moments. So as we're moving into a contemplative lifestyle, what we're going to find is that the triggers don't just go away because we've started centering prayer, because we've got quiet time in the morning or the evening or whatever. All of that unconscious material is still doing its thing. In the process of contemplative practice, a lot of that gets revealed. It starts bubbling up. But where it bubbles up is not during your sits. It's not during your meditation or your centering prayer. It's going to bubble up throughout the day at random times. It's amazing how it just kind of hits you. But also, as you're kind of thinning out the barrier between the unconscious and the conscious, a lot of those memories and emotions are going to hit you at times you don't expect. And that can be difficult. That can be difficult to work through during the day. And so the welcoming practice is an excellent way to be able to deal with the onset of triggers, emotional triggers, and also to establish some emotional regulation at the same time. And so it's a way for us to work through and move back into balance. When you're triggered or caught by something unpleasant, he says, begin by simply being present to your feelings, experiencing it not just mentally, but also emotionally and physically. So you feel it in your bones, right? Feel it in your body. Don't try to rationalize or explain the feeling, but witness and give attention to the sensation. That's a real key statement right there. We don't want to get our head involved. We don't want to start thinking about it. We're not trying to psychoanalyze ourselves. We're not trying to figure out where it's coming from. Well, all we're trying to do is really experience it. That witness, that observer, that deeper self that is the witness, that is the observer, the watcher, allow that to take place. Watch it, give attention to the sensation. Welcome the feeling, speaking it aloud if you can. Welcome anger. Sounds silly, but welcome anger, welcome fear, welcome hunger, whatever. Repeat this as many times as you need to truly sense yourself embracing and receiving the feeling. Then pray the welcoming prayer regularly. So now that's the offline part. So the three-step process is something that you're going to do in the heat of battle, but you also want to reinforce it by praying the prayer, extended prayer regularly, even daily. He says it's probably not too much. It can become your daily bread. So now it becomes kind of like the mantrams that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. We're saying the mantrams over and over also has the same effect of grounding us, bringing us back to the present. And as we say it enough times, it gets down into that muscle memory, that procedural memory. As the ancients said, the prayer is saying us rather than us saying the prayer. And so getting that whole concept, deeply into ourselves with the regular practice of the prayer is something that's also going to help us. Because then what happens is if we don't have to think about the process, then it's natural for us as soon as we're triggered to be able to go into that mode and bring ourselves through quicker and quicker, reducing our response time. So with that much said, reactions, responses, additions. What are you thinking about, Danielle, over there?
Feel free to cut me off because I have been thinking about this I've been practicing it daily for, I think about 2 months ago is when you mentioned the welcoming prayer in some format on Zoom. And so I've been I looked it up. I felt moved to integrate that into my practice. And it's been really interesting. I recall, and this has been, since then, I've been introducing it with clients. I've been introducing it with friends. I think I've sent it to Kathy and Beth and Becky at one point. And my first reaction to it was, oh, hell no. No, no. I'm not welcoming all of this. And that's interesting. The first reaction for a lot of people, it's like, I'm going to welcome all of this, what's perceived to be negative. And like Bill said, welcoming it for my healing? No, no, not wanting to accept that either, because I don't think that certain things are conducive to my healing. So I got all judgy about it. And I'm like, okay, let's just sit with it. Let's just keep saying it. Let's just keep sitting with it. And what it evolved into for me was something that resonated with who I am already and how I work with people and how I work with myself. Is that for me, suffering occurs when I'm trying to deny that something exists or trying to change it right away. And I think that's part of my frustration with CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. I'm just like, okay, cognitive behavior therapy, though just a tool, I have a lot of bias against it, but just a tool says, okay, we're supposed to challenge it, we're supposed to check it, and then we're supposed to change it. We're supposed to catch it, check it, and change it. They call it the 3 C's. That's one concept of it. And so for me, what resonates with me is just saying, okay, I see you anger. I see you depression. I see you this. And just kind of say, I see you, and do I welcome you? Well, here you are. So yeah, I guess I do. And coming to a level of acceptance that that's a part of me that is up. And so coming to, at first I was acknowledging, and so the acknowledgement and the welcoming was a transitional point for me in this prayer. And so for me, welcoming it, and now we have a joke around the house here and amongst certain friends when I talk to them, it's kind of like, oh, I've been welcoming this, and then I'll walk through the house and I'll go, hello, anxiety. Hello, sadness. And then Robert will be in a thing. I'll say, hello, anger. Play with it a little bit, but it's coming to this radical acceptance of what is in the moment. And I think that's key for me. So when I think about it in the use with clients or whatever, I look at it more in line with dialectical behavior therapy, where you tap into that wise mind part of us that becomes an observer, that observer part that says, okay, we're not having any judgment with any of what comes up. But so that's where I think it resonates more with a DBT approach therapeutically, clinically, than it does CBT. Now, I still struggle for the healing, but I'm letting go of that. And I had more to say, but I can't remember, so it's not important. But there you have it.
Would you say this is kind of in line with acceptance and commitment therapy too? Kind of like, yeah,
Absolutely.
that's what I thought too. As much, I don't know as much about it. I just know that it works for me more than CBT.
Yeah, definitely. The other piece that I did want to bring up is the one that I've always had with the 12-step program, and that concept of powerlessness. And it was always interesting to me that the 12-step program, which, I created programs around that, had that as, that's what the concept, or that's a big part of their recovery, but yet there's a lot of doing. So I'm powerless, but yet there's doing. There's the abstinence model. I understand the powerlessness piece of it, but it's kind of like it's the work. See, I'm going to stop now because my thoughts are not coming together. So I probably should have stopped before. So there you go.
So here's the thing that to understand about the powerless portion of it, I think that's most relevant to me, is that we don't have control over these triggers. We don't have control over these emotions.
Yeah.
And they're going to come. The emotions are going to do what they do, and we don't have any control. So we're powerless over their presence in this particular moment. We can't stop them. But what we can do is that we cannot repress them. We can go ahead and welcome them. If we don't engage our shadow, we're going to be in the wilderness for as long as we want. But to be able to bring, the shadow and the persona back together again, the part that we project, the part that we want to project to people, because we think that's advantageous, and then the part that we are repressing or hiding because we think that's disadvantageous. But to bring those together, to come to grips with the fullness of who we are, is really what we're talking about. And so we don't have any control over that. They're going to come, but we can control what we do about them. That's the doing part, right?
Yeah.
So even in
Yeah.
our powerlessness over the addiction, over the presence of the triggers or whatever, we still have something that we can do. And if we do our Hippocratic oath and we say the first thing that we're going to do is no harm, that's a good start. But how we get there, this is just a technique that someone developed to do something that can be done other ways, but it is a formal way that can be useful. And it's not the only way, but it is a way.
Yeah.
And it can really work. But I think you really put your finger on it. It is so counterintuitive that we would welcome these negative feelings because they are so painful. They can be traumatic. And they can be something that we've been banging our heads against, our entire lives that we can remember. And they become a nemesis in many ways. And yet now we're going to welcome them. But that is pretty much what loving the enemy is all about, even if the enemy is within. We have to be able to welcome. We have to be able to see the opportunity for learning. That's pretty much what we can look at life one of two ways. We can look at life as a victim, that everything is being done to us, or we can look at life as a student, as an opportunity for learning. And that's what the welcoming prayer is trying to do, to allow us to be able to see everything that occurs to us from a student's vantage point. How can this teach me? How can this also move me forward? But we can't do that until we own it. And I love the humor that you're putting into it, welcome anger, that's perfect because that is so disarming, that is so diffusing, de-escalating all those D words. And so that's really important to keep the humor going. What I want to do is let's dive into a couple other sources, and then we can come back and discuss and see if this answers some questions or even brings up some other um, discussion points. So can you all see that? Okay, so this is what I wrote in that second ebook on contemplative practice. Mindfulness, our sense of being present during our waking day, can be shattered when powerful emotions suddenly engulf us. We have no control over our emotions. They come and go of their own accord and are especially disruptive when something in the moment triggers unconscious, painful memories that haven't been fully processed. Even if we're not consciously aware of the memories being triggered, we still feel them as emotions that can sometimes be nearly as powerful as they were at the initial event. Recovering from these triggered emotions requires awareness, and the welcoming practice or prayer is a technique, a three-step shorthand way of coming back to center and presence when an emotional trigger has pulled us out. A detailed look at the welcoming practice can be found at these two links. The first is a quick overview of what the technique is and how it works, and the second includes a video and printed information that goes into much more detail, which may be more than you need right now, so use is needed. Actually, unfortunately, that second link that was Cynthia Bourgeau, I tried it today before this, and it's dead now, so you can't go to that one, but the first one is what we're going to talk about next. The idea is not to run from or suppress the emotions, anxiety, or whatever has been triggered in you. But at the moment, very quickly acknowledge and lean into them. Welcome them, accepting them as part of yourself, but not the whole of yourself. And let them go by moving back into the moment, back into presence. There are little affirmations in the third part of the practice that could help you lock back into mindfulness. The original formulation of this third part is, I let go of my desire for security and survival. I let go of my desire for esteem and affection. I let go of my desire for power and control. Again, the three biological needs, right? I let go of my desire to change the situation. These would be good affirmations or prayers to say often throughout the day. They speak to core beliefs that are all centered around our basic human need for security and survival, esteem and affection, power and control. Our ability or inability to meet these needs, desires, is the experience that became core beliefs, our most basic assumptions about life, relationships, and ourselves. When we let go of trying to control, We can come back to the real and only moment and just be present. This doesn't mean we don't work hard for the things that we want and need, but we realize that we can only control processes, not outcomes. Letting go of trying to control outcomes, which is the source of stress and anxiety, by focusing on working the process to get there, both focuses us on the present moment, the only moment that exists, and also our best chance of getting to the outcome we desire without the sense of stress. So let's go to this first link here. So this is Busted Halo. Don't you love that? And this is what works a welcoming prayer. I want to go down to the method here and actually this second paragraph. So right here, if you're struggling with a bad feeling, the power of this little method is that it offers a structured way to embrace and accept it, so you can release it and move on. There are 3 phases to the welcoming prayer. You might go directly from one to the next in a single, relatively formulaic prayer sequence, or you might find yourself staying in one phase as it does its interior work. Using Cynthia Bourgeault's labels, the 3 parts are: 1, focus and sink in; 2, welcome; 3, let go. So focus and sink in. This is not about indulging bad feelings. It's not about amplifying them or justifying them, but feel the feeling. Allow yourself to become immersed in it. Let it wash over you. Don't run away from it or fight it. Just feel what it's like to be experiencing it. The word feel can mean either to have a physical experience of touching something or to have a mental experience of encountering an emotion. Connect those two. Feel the feeling or emotion physically. Notice your body, how you are tense or anxious or hot or fidgety or lethargic. As with meditation, you are just observing the feeling, not trying to alter it. Welcome. As I've said before, here, you can only start from where you are, and you can only move forward if you accept where you are. So now, affirm the rightness of where you are by welcoming the bad feeling or emotion and acknowledging God's presence in the moment. You do this by literally saying, welcome, bad feeling. If you are frozen in fear, say, welcome fear. Hot with rage, say, welcome rage. Now we're talking here about feelings and emotions, not problems and physical hardships. We are not welcoming illness or injustice. If you think you should be applying the welcoming prayer to a problem or illness, think again about what negative emotion or feeling is being kicked up. You notice that distinction? It can start from a problem, but we don't want to dwell intellectually on the problem. This is not about being conceptual. This is not about being abstract. This is getting into the soma, right? This is about your somatic response. If you think you should be applying the welcoming prayer to a problem or illness, think again about what negative emotion or feeling is being kicked up. You probably will be dealing with a variety of fear or anger. There's nothing passive about acceptance. That's a good line. There's nothing passive about acceptance. Acceptance merely establishes you in reality so that you can respond to a situation effectively. Acceptance merely establishes you in reality so that you can respond to a situation effectively. If you are terrified about a health issue, that fear may be immobilizing you. Accepting and then releasing the fear may free you to be able to deal with the issue. And then let go. There are at least 4 ways to do this last part. Mary Mrozowski's original version uses a fixed statement. You say these lines no matter what the specific issue. I let go of my desire for security and survival. I let go of my desire for esteem and affection. I let go of my desire for power and control. I let go of my desire to change the situation. Not a bad little prayer to add to your morning repertoire, too. Another version just takes that last line and ties it to the current situation. I let go of the desire to change this feeling, whatever that feeling is. A third alternative is even briefer and names the feeling. I let go of my fear, anger, etc. And finally, my favorite for its added depth with the same economy of words, God, I give you my fear, anger, etc. That night or the next morning when you meditate, and you do meditate, right? You can reinforce the letting go. The two complement each other. He said, it's part of my spiritual first aid kit. Some take the welcoming prayer to another level as one of the key pieces in their spiritual life. There are workshops devoted to the method. People draw charts. They apply it to positive as well as negative emotions. I haven't done all that, though I'm sure it's valuable. For me, the welcoming prayer is a complement to my meditation practice. And it's a band-aid, part of my spiritual first aid kit that I can take wherever I go to break a negative pattern. Its power is in its simplicity. Focus, welcome, let go. If you find yourself fighting against an emotion or feeling, try the welcoming prayer. If you already use it, or if you try it after reading this, I'd love to hear about your experience. Leave a comment, like my podcast and all that. So here's a little bit more about the process, and I hope that kind of fleshed it out for you. What's funny is, as I was preparing for this and thinking about it, what popped into my mind, are there any Dune fans here? Do I have any Dune fans?
Mhm.
Frank Herbert Dune fans? Do you remember the litany against fear?
Mm.
Let me read through this and see if this kind of just gives us a little bit finer point. So what I did here is a mashup of two articles, Why Dune's Litany Against Fear is Good Psychological Advice, and then also Anxiety and Pop Culture, What Dune's Litany Against Fear Gets Wrong and Right About Anxiety. I'm not going to get into the wrong stuff, but you can follow the link if you want to read the full article about what he says psychologically. Most of what he focuses on is the first line, I must not fear, because he says, hey, it's not under your control. How can you say you must not do something if it's not under your control, which is something that we just talked about. But in the Dune universe, we don't need to get into any of that. But this becomes a repeating, almost a meme throughout the original trilogy of books. And so whenever a character finds themselves in a paralyzing situation of fear, if they were trained in this, they would recite this litany kind of as a prayer or as a mantra. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. So let's break this down a little bit and be thinking about the connection to the welcoming prayer that we were just reading. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. These lines highlight the core belief that fear inhibits rational thought and decision making and emphasizes the destructive power of fear, suggesting that it can lead to a complete loss of self-control. Now, we can think beyond fear this to all the other negative emotions, which are rooted in fear anyway, right? But we can look beyond that and see so that if it's not simply fear that we seem to be facing at the moment, but whether it's anger, rage, sadness, whatever, that we can also be thinking of it in this respect. Fear starts in the amygdala, which rapidly signals danger to the rest of the body, initiating the fight or flight response. In humans, our higher cognitive brain can modulate that fear based on what we've learned. That's why we can enjoy fear from an amusement park haunted house. But real fear or facing life threat has a way of shutting down our higher cognitive brain as a fight or flight response takes over. The brain becomes flooded by fear. The prefrontal cortex goes quiet and incapable of strategic or complex thinking. That kind of fear can realistically be understood as a mind killer because it shuts down our mind's ability to think. Under fear's influence, we actually default back to a more animal response than a human one. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. This section emphasizes confronting fear directly and allowing it to be experienced without being consumed by it. Facing what you fear is essential to overcoming fear. If you never face your fears, you get stuck in a pattern of avoidance. Few themes in modern psychology and neuroscience over the last decade have been more prominent than this, that avoiding negative emotions tends to make them stronger. This is particularly true with anxiety and fear, where several important therapies are based around helping people tolerate exposure to their fear in order to gradually lessen it. In fact, research in positive psychology and the science of happiness find that sitting with our negative emotions tends to lessen them, and that actually makes us happier. That's why permitting fear to pass over us and through us is key. It's what psychologists call acceptance. Acceptance is the opposite of trying to avoid, get rid of, or change feelings. This mindfulness-based action reminds us that we are separate from our fear. We can observe our fear and let it pass us by. We can experience it without being damaged by it. Facing our fear is the way to go, but not if it floods us and triggers the mind killer response. And then you got a little disclaimer here. Please note, this is not good advice for processing traumatic memories, which are experienced differently. Please work on trauma-based fears with your therapist. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. This suggests that by facing and allowing our fears to pass, one can gain a deeper understanding of its nature and origin. When it has gone past, points to the fact that emotions are always temporary. Emotions are always temporary. Even the most intense fear and panic do pass. When we face our fears and allow ourselves to feel whatever we're going to feel, eventually the fear or anxiety passes. And this is what allows us to unlearn our fears. Turning the inner eye to see its path refers to our ability to be mindful and to observe what happens in our body and mind. When we avoid fear and anxiety, we never get the chance to observe these feelings run their course. They don't teach us anything, right? When we face our fears and allow the feelings to happen, we are able to observe that the feelings follow a cycle of occurring, peaking, or plateauing, and then fading away. And where the fear is gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. This reinforces the idea that by confronting and surmounting fear, the individual remains stronger and more resilient. You are not defined by your feelings and thoughts. As the previous line suggested, all feelings and thoughts are temporary. This final line emphasizes that what persists is that part of us that contains and is greater than the thoughts and feelings that are always passing. That's when we learn that where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. The fear has truly left us. The litany's effectiveness stems from its use of repetition and its emphasis on the psychological and spiritual aspects of facing fear. By reciting the litany, individuals can harness its power to focus their minds, maintain calm, and persevere through challenging situations. And what more powerful statement of confidence and victory can there be than this? Only I will remain. That is what facing our fears mindfully and processing them teaches us. We remain. So I love the way those kind of dovetail, the litany. And I think that each one of these gives a little bit more insight into what we're actually doing as we go through this process, right? Of focusing, welcoming, and then letting go. Okay. So let's talk about it a little bit more. First of all, does the process make sense? Are there any parts of the process that still either don't make sense or you're not quite getting how they work? Are there some
we
that you
supposed to
feel are
feel?
an absolute resistance to? Any of that?
Well, I understand the idea of I mean, for me, so much of this is goes back to the third step, just made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him, and just that allowance and that acceptance of all things. And I mean, this chapter is everything, like situations, conditions, and desires. denial for these emotions and everything. But I guess regarding like the reading in itself, what does the processing look like? I would be interested in knowing, like, I mean, I know what it might look like for me. Like in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'm not identifying with it, like fear, for example. So, but I'm allowing it and I'm experiencing it for I guess as long as I need to. And I guess that might change for me on a day-to-day basis and from one person to another. But I'm not also like becoming explosive. I'm not going around anything or under or over. I'm going through it. But what does it look like and what does it feel like?
Hmm. Danielle, how could you answer that question for you personally, now that you've been using the welcoming prayer? What does
Uh,
the processing look like or feel like?
yeah. It's not a prayer that I begin my quiet times in the mornings with it, and I say it and I pause after each one. I'm actually trying to commit it to memory. So, but I'm trying to let go of that process because then I go like, why can't I memorize it quicker? And then I get into all those thoughts. But I say it every morning, and then again, it's a practice that I live out throughout the day by welcoming it all. And this relinquishing, it's the relinquishing. It's really for me, it's an energy thing. Anger is energy, love is energy. It's all anger that I just need to allow to flow through me. So once I acknowledge it and welcome it, that's the big thing. Welcoming it, it like opens the channel for it to flow right through me.
Mhm.
So that's what it looks like for me. It's a practice, it's an intention that I set. And then I have discussions with God about if I like it that day or if I don't, because I have a difficult, complicated relationship with this prayer. But ultimately, it at the core it resonates with who I am, and so that's what.
So are you actually experiencing, so if you're angry at Robert, have you been
Mhm.
able to welcome the anger and feel it kind of dissipate? Have you really felt?
Yes. Yes, that's why I was laughing. That's why we get into this thing with Robert. If there's something I'm angry about and we don't get into arguments that much, but I'll notice like we're having a strong discussion, not an argument, but a discussion. And I go, "Oh, welcome, anger." And he's going, "Oh,
Now, Danielle, do you actually say that, or
yes,
you do say it? Oh, that's
yes,
perfect. I love that. That's
yes."
perfect.
Yeah.
We could just talk, and he goes, "Oh, so you're feeling a little angry?" I go, I'm just noticing it. I'm not hanging on to it. I'm not attached to it. I'm just like, oh, look at me. I felt some anger with that statement, what you just said. And then I could say, well, what did you mean? He goes, so it gives us opportunities to just get clarification in the here now moment of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, we play with it.
I
Oh,
love
that's
that
terrific.
analogy too, because like when you do open the door, you really are genuinely like accepting it into your home, and you're talking and hanging out and communicating. You're not that same person that you just let in either. You're not identifying, but such a good analogy.
Mhm.
And then they go and you're not judging them for leaving. They're just gone.
Oh,
That's
yeah, yeah.
that's perfect. Wow.
Yeah, with my last client tonight, I was sharing a thought that you told us about a few months back, Dave. This whole idea of, we gotta be present to our problems to invite God into them to help us solve them, essentially. Right. And I was using that idea to talk about exactly this concept of just allowing ourselves to just be present to our own experience so that I think you said when God shows up, most people are not home or something along those lines.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That was a Richard Rohrism. Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that idea of just
Well,
being
actually, it was God
to
only shows up when we're not home.
God only shows up when we're not home.
because we have to be out of our minds in order to
Uh,
experience God's presence. So God
Okay.
only shows up when we're not home. When we're home, it's kind of like a high pressure bubble in weather. It just
Uh,
pushes everything out. But if we can go low pressure, we suck everything in, right? So that's the idea there.
yeah, I think I heard that completely differently, or I understood that completely differently. Or in the concept, in from the idea of the welcoming prayer, my thinking was we have to be present to our own problems to invite God into them, to participate.
And that's absolutely true. But the way that we are most present is when we're not thinking about
Mm,
presence, right?
mm, mm.
So
for
Mm.
notice
me,
this whole
letting go of
process. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, for me, I think the hardest part of that prayer and the one I still struggle with, and it's less about the prayer and more about I let go of my desire for safety and what is it? Safety and see, it's out of my
Safety and
mind.
Control and
security,
Safety
Security.
and security.
right?
That's a big need for me. And that comes up often. And so that's the one that I really struggle with. Like, what does it mean to let go of that for me?
Mhm.
I totally agree. I have a real problem with safety and security.
That's
Now, I mean, those three that we read earlier kind of go together. That's human. That's that's human.
mm,
Um, it's very difficult to do, especially if you haven't felt safe and there wasn't any security in your past. I mean, not forever, but you've had some trauma. That's pretty tough.
Mhm.
Um,
No, no, but do remember, Beth, that we're not talking about anything that would be an actual clear and present danger. So when we all need safety and security, absolutely need that. If there's something in the environment in the moment that is threatening our safety and security, then fear is the appropriate response. And we need to go into fight or flight. We need to protect ourselves or do whatever we need to do. What we're talking about is when we recognize that it is our safety and security kind of core beliefs, those programs that are running from when a time in the past when we weren't safe or secure, are now being brought to bear in a situation where it's not appropriate. Now we can let go of that response because it's not needed at this moment. And we can see it for what it is. Remember, what precedes all of this is awareness. Danielle has to be aware enough as the conversation is escalating and as she's starting to feel the rising anger, she has to be aware enough to be able to stop and say, "Oh, okay, here it is again. Welcome anger." And then they laugh or do whatever they do and they carry on. If we can have that awareness, if the watcher is present enough, the observer is present enough because we have done enough of the contemplative work, now we can see what's going on and we can make the distinction between what is an appropriate response and what is a triggered response. And we can let go of what's illusory. But that you're right, that's why they're biological needs. We all need them. We need esteem and affection. We need security and safety, and we need a certain amount of power and control to be able to just work the processes in our lives. It's when they're not appropriate to the moment or when they become pathological in us so that they are now dysfunctional. That's what we're trying to deal with. So, and the other thing too is that we have to, we, there, how do I put this? We got a stigma with these negative emotions that we've developed for ourselves. And it's probably because of the ideal persona that we're constantly trying to project. These triggered negative emotions don't fit into that persona. And so we don't want to deal with them. We don't even want to admit that they're there in us, right? And so if we're still doing that, if we're still trying to push them away and pretend that they don't exist, then obviously we can't, not only can we not do the welcoming practice of the welcoming prayer, but we can't grow, we can't learn. because we're actively trying to hold on to that image of ourselves that we've so carefully cultivated over 40 years. And we're not willing to actually see the shadow. We're not willing to see the unprocessed issues that are still down there. So that's an admission, again, I suppose, of powerlessness, you could put it that way, that we have to admit that this stuff is in there and it's stuff that we want to work on and need to work on. And so there's a whole lot of going on here in this very simple prayer, which is why it's so hard.
And I'd like to share an anecdote that I really think it relates. When I was first being treated for cancer, MD Anderson, one thing that I learned in talking with docs on these visits is they're reluctant to start treatment until they know you've accepted the diagnosis.
Ooh, yeah.
And so I remember writing to Beth when I was there for radiation. I was writing about this because it seemed like such a paradox, because they really, really foster this and they talk with you about accepting the diagnosis. And it's almost like once they believe that you've accepted it, then they're all about treatment. It's like, okay, now that you accepted it, let's work at getting rid of it.
That's fascinating, Bray. Okay, so how do they
Yeah. What does
believe
that look
that you
like?
have accepted the diagnosis? Thank you, Danielle. We're on the beam now.
Yeah. I'm curious.
They're not going to withhold treatment, but they work vigorously at helping you accept that you need it, that you have the diagnosis.
But how do they do that? I,
Oh,
how,
there are counseling programs there. They can refer you to social services or counselors there, or all of whom are initially are programming or not programming. Their program is focused on acceptance of the diagnosis, and being able to look past it, but just that initial acceptance. And the prognosis for people who don't accept it is not good. The other thing is, I remember vividly what happened. The first thing that happened that really helped me accept it, and it was just kind of an experience that totally reframed it for me.
That is such a perfect analogy for what we're talking about. If we can't accept that we are imperfect people, if we can't accept that our stone is not yet smooth, how in the world are we going to proceed any further? We are not going to have the awareness that is necessary to even initiate the welcoming prayer in the moment of trigger. So that's perfect. That I hope puts a finer point on what it is we're trying to do. We have to be able to accept this stuff in ourselves so that we'll even proceed. Why in the world will we take one step along Jesus' way if we didn't think that we needed it? Yeah, the people who resisted Jesus' message, were the ones who thought that they were righteous, right? And Jesus said, hey, the physician goes where the sick are, not those who are well, and certainly not those who believe they are well, because they're going to be the last ones to be able to accept a message of transformation. So yes, this
And
acceptance
don't they also say that with like addiction too? Like to accept, the whole AA philosophy of accepting
the
I have
first
this problem. Isn't that the first step in
First step.
either Al-Anon or AA,
Admitted
accepting
that we were powerless.
right.
Absolutely.
So, and I think I used to hear Frank Billman talking about people in AA who were there, but they were there prematurely. They were not ready. They were not, ready for prime time, as you say, because they hadn't really accepted that they had a problem. They think they could handle it, beat it, control it on their own, kind of a thing, and then only to come back later and become more successful once they have.
Yep.
So
I like that. That makes sense for the recovery model, but I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this cancer model.
It seems like there would be like almost a process of like grief too, like going through the anger, the sadness, the fear. Would you say that was kind of for you, Brady, or
I'm sure that's true.
before you?
I'm sure that's true. Initially denial, and then you just,
Yeah.
you can list them off afterwards. And And Kubler-Ross's research on death and dying and the stages of death wasn't on people who had lost someone. There were people who had diagnoses of where they were going to die. So yeah, there's stages there, but I think so.
Yeah, he was, I was kind of in a state of shock, but I was talking with my sister, who was an NP, who knew about MD Anderson. We had no clue. And she was saying, sarcoma, leiomyosarcomas, like big time. And Brady was like, I can't go to Houston. I got to work. And I was like, you might not be here to work.
Yeah.
Do you get this?
Yeah.
And so he was, he definitely went through some of definitely the denial. And, it was,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, this was rough. This was really, really hard stuff.
Right.
But that's I think as we both accepted it, then we were, able to move through it.
Move forward.
Move
There was a great moment. It was Beth and I were there for the first time. And we had done labs, and then I was pulled aside with two other men to get X-ray. So we're in this little room, and we're taking our shirts off, and we're putting on the gown things for the X-ray. One guy had very little jaw, so I figured he's already been in treatment for a while. The other guy was kind of a biker dude, older, grizzly beard, and then there was me, and I was scared. And the biker dude looks at me and goes, "Oh, sorry, what are you here for?" And I kind of bowed my head on, "I'm here for cancer." And he looks at me and goes, "Fuck, we're all here for cancer. What are you here for?" And it was just kind of like, oh, okay. It just made it easier, a little bit easier to say, okay, yeah. I'm here for cancer too. All right.
Yeah.
It's so funny, Brady, because that's exactly the way I felt about working in recovery. Everybody knew why you were there from across the parking lot. There was no pretense. There was no reason to even try to pretend that anything else was going on. You were there. And it's such a contrast from Sunday morning church,
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, William, does that help you a little bit understanding the MD Anderson model there?
Well, there's a part of me that's thinking about like we think things into existence, right? Like this whole idea of like people who can, like, soon as they get the diagnosis or they hear about the diagnosis, there are people that surrender to it and they're gone a year later, right? And there's a kind of acceptance there, right? In some ways. And then there are other people that are like, no, screw this. I'm going to beat this. And
they're gone.
yeah.
And I want to be clear. I mean, it's not like they encourage you to kind of deny it away,
Right.
because once they're going to start treatment no matter what, but they encourage you to really accept it. And once they see that you've accepted it, they're all about, you're an agent, you're teaming with us to deal with this.
Mhm.
And we're working together. The people who drop off, the people who don't accept it, non-compliant, they don't pursue treatment. They're gone. So.
Yeah, I want to add, I can kind of relate. So for you, Brady, it's that acceptance of cancer. In my case, it was my situation. This was 7 years ago. It wasn't until I accepted my situation that this person is gone and he's not coming back. That's when my healing started. That's when I entered that support group, and I was crying because the leader was the leader also of another support group I go to, which is how to improve this, which is denial. I look back, that is denial. Oh, it's how to improve, how to save your relationship, how to save your marriage. And she tells me, Ellen, come, I am a leader of this other group. And I did not want to go. I said, no, 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 I'm not in that group. It took about 2 years. And I told her, Sonia, I'm here. She said, I'm here on Friday nights at 7. Okay, you come. It took 2 years. I said, Sonia, here I am. And that was the start. It's the acceptance. The longing was gone, the denial was gone, the pain was so painful. But it had to take that. And now, William, now you're asking me, how does it take to get to acceptance? I don't know. Just suddenly clicked.
No, I'm not struggling with the accept. I see the logic in the acceptance part and being realistic about the diagnosis so you can work on it, right? But they're kind of like I'm thinking of more like a placebo effect kind of thing, right? More like like I can will myself into getting better. Yeah, you know what? I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, I think there's some value to that as long as you're not ignoring doing
Yep.
other things to get better. And I did everything. I drank tincture of mushroom. I went through acupuncture. I mean, people were asking me, what are you doing about it? And I said, everything, which is true.
So let's end the session on welcoming prayer this way. Sometimes I think there is the sense that with the contemplative practice or centering prayer or meditation, that it can be very ethereal, that it can be very spiritual, that it can be very clean in terms of separating ourselves from everything that's out there in the greasy world, and we can somehow keep things pure. I think the welcoming practice is a reminder that we cannot separate those things. If we don't bring our spirituality, however we conceive of that, into the soma, into the body, into the dirt of all of our emotions and all that goes on in sweaty real life, then we're not going to make it. We have to integrate the two. The welcoming practice is our reminder that yes, these triggers are going to come. Yes, those emotions are still there. Yes, the whole, part of being physically human does not go away. In fact, we need to immerse into it. We need to own it. We need to absolutely feel it if we're going to be able to get through to the other side and then have a balanced life that contains all those aspects of being human. We're not divorcing ourselves. We're not praying it away. We're not somehow escaping it. We're immersing into it. And I think that's one of the things that the welcoming practice can remind us, that this process is absolutely holistic in that respect.
Yeah.
Okay, that's enough for now. Where did he go?
God, are you looking for there? Me, Dave?
I'm looking for you, and I'm only seeing myself in you. So
yeah, well, I'm reflected in your glory.
Yeah.
I'm having a rough time here. Bear with me, guys.
Okay.
Lord, I thank you that even with rough times, it seems to be maybe the point of this whole night is what to do with rough times as they come our way and they affect our lives. So we turn our lives over to you. We turn our will, our passions, our desires, our foibles, our victories, our disasters, every aspect of who we are and what we experience. And just ask that you reveal yourself more and more in each one of these learning opportunities that we have. And help us to see that they can be learning opportunities. Sometimes we're facing too much fear or too much preconceived notions about why things should be a certain way. So let us let go of those preconceived notions and just turn our minds off for a minute to get out of the way, so we're just standing in your presence and listening for that invisible voice that directs us and guides us and draws us ever closer and deeper into your love. We thank you, Lord, for everything that you do for us and how you love us. So it's in your precious and holy name, Lord Jesus, that we pray and we give our thanks and we say our amens. Amen.
So what you haven't accepted it yet, is what you're saying?
Who what?
So you haven't accepted it yet, right?
No, I think I'm good with it. I'm trying to understand just that one piece of like the positive thinking.
Right.
See,
I know where I'm in the same boat with you are in that
You
regard.
can't restart the conversation after we pray. That's not allowed. What are you guys
Well, I'm
doing?
sorry, Dave. I didn't get to say
Sorry.
much. So.
You have to get a room for this, not here.
Call me anyway.
I will have the links to these articles that I read in the email that comes tomorrow. So if you want to dig in or revisit them, you can do that. But in the meantime, go to sleep. Go home.
Buenas noches.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Great session
Take
tonight.
care.
Bye,
Sunday.
Sarah. Bye, Kathy.
Bye, sweetie. Good night.
Good night, good night, good night. Good night, Jordana.
Good night. See you Sunday.
See you Sunday, dear. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.